What's up, guys? Thanks for stopping by today. We are going to talk about another free code camp basic algorithm scripting challenge. And this one in particular is called Chunky Monkey. And it sounds like it's going to be something fun or something quick, simple and just like a breather in between. But really, it's kind of the opposite. In my opinion, it was kind of the most complex challenge that we've had in this section so far. It took me quite a while to figure it out, but after some thought and some research and some trial and error, I was able to get a solution that worked. And of course, I want to share that solution with you guys so you can compare it to yours or just use it as kind of like a guideline or anything that you guys needed to use it for to get this challenge solved. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into the instructions. And basically, we are instructed to write a function that splits an array into groups the length of a set size and returns them as a two-dimensional array. Okay, so that was, a little bit kind of tricky to understand at first. I had to read it a few times and then I kind of got what it was trying to do. So let's go over here to the code. You can see I already have everything written out. I thought it would be easier to kind of just explain my solution that's already done as opposed to writing it out again, which might take a little longer. But we have a function here, and it's called chunk array and groups. It takes in two arguments, the array and the set size. And if we go down to the bottom here, we can see where it's calling that function. It is passing in the first argument, which is the array, and the second argument, which is the size. And that is what we're going to be using for an example throughout this video. It's going to be this one down here. So just keep this one in mind. When I refer to the size, I'm referring to 2. When I refer to the array, I'm referring to this one here. Okay, so um, let's go ahead and start with my solution. As you can see, I have a variable called an array, and it has a global scope of this function. So I can use this array or this variable throughout this entire function anywhere. And it is an empty array. And the reason I decided to make an empty array variable was because of the instructions where it says we're going to have to split these arrays into two-dimensional arrays and then return them as another array. So I figured I would need an empty array to hold those two-dimensional arrays and then return. Okay, now comes the more logical part, the nitty gritty, where it kind of gets a little bit more complex. But let's just take it step by step here. So, as you can see, I have a for loop. And the reason I decided to do a for loop was because we're going to have to somehow grab the elements in this array, split them into a set size array, and then we're going to have to store them in a different array. So obviously we're going to have to get some iteration of the main array. And that's what better way to do that than have a for loop. So I decided to make a for loop. And of course I have my initializer, which is set to 0. And then my condition, which I just basically say, as long as I is less than or equal to the length of my array, I want this for loop to run. And let's just say, for instance, that we use this array. It has 4 elements in it, so that means the length of it will be 4. So as long as I is less than or equal to 4, I want this to run. Now I know you probably noticed that I have something different here that's not something that we used in the past, and it's a different increase or decrease condition here. And so every time this for loop runs, instead of doing the normal increase I by 1, I have something different here. And it is increase I by the number that is in the size variable. So for instance, if we're using this number, which is the number 2, and as the size variable, every time this for loop goes around, I would increase by 2. And the reason I did that was because I want to, remember, I'm trying to make two-dimensional arrays that are the size that we declared in our function. So if I want it to be a certain size, I'm going to want to have that size declared somewhere, and I'm going to go ahead and keep count of it by using it here as my initializer, or as the variable I. So basically every time this for loop goes around, I will increase by whatever number is in this size variable. And you'll kind of see why I'm using that a little bit later on as I go down more in this for loop. So I know you see that I have an if statement here, but I'm going to skip over that right now because it's not really important until I go explain line 12. So line 12, you can see I am calling my empty array, which is an array, and I am calling the push function on that. And as we remember from past challenges, the push function basically takes a value and pushes it to the end of an array. So we're going to do that. We're going to take a certain value and add it to the end of our variable in array. So what exactly are we going to push to that array? Well, our instructions tell us to return an array that holds two-dimensional arrays. So sorry about that. So we're going to want this to be a two-dimensional array. It's going to be one main array that holds other arrays. So basically we're going to push another array. It's so confusing, I'm sorry. If you have any questions on clarification with that, just comment below. But hopefully you guys understand that we're going to just basically push another array into this array to make a two-dimensional array. Okay, so what exactly are we going to push from this array? Well, we know we have a set size, and therefore we're going to have to somehow make these sizes known, or kind of grab the certain amount of elements from our main array and put them into another array. And we can do that by using the slice function. And that function, as we know, has a start point and it has an end point. So the first time this for loop goes around, our initializer is going to be set to 0. So that means if we pass in I as a start point for our slice function, it's going to take our array, which in this case will be this one, and it's going to start slicing at the first element, or 0, which would be A, or this very beginning element. And we're saying, I want you to stop slicing at 0 plus whatever the number size is. And since for this case size is 2, we want I 0 plus 2. So the first time around, the endpoint would be 2. We wanted to stop slicing at the second element. So it would start at 0, which would be A. And as we know, the slice function doesn't stop on the end number exactly, but it stops the number before the number we declare. So if this holds 2, we can expect it to stop at the first element. So this one will be 0, this one will be 1, this one will be 2, this one will be 3. If we declare the endpoint as 2, it's going to say 0, 1, and then stop. So the very first array that will be pushed into our variable in array would look something like this. A, B, and that's it. So that's the very first array that will be pushed into our in array variable. So I'm going to just put that in there kind of as just a reference. A, B. That's what our array, our variable in array looks like right now. So let's say that our for loop goes around a second time. We've already added our first array to that variable. Now we want to continue iterating through the main array and add another one. So if we go back to the beginning, I is no longer equal to 0, because remember, we declared that every time the for loop runs, we want it to be increased by size. And since we're using this example, I will be increased by 2. So now I is no longer 0, but is 2. So is I less than or equal to array.length? Remember, the array.length would be, in this case, 4. So yes, 2 is less than or equal to 4. So we can go ahead and once again start running through here. I'm not going to talk about this one just yet again because I kind of want to save it for last. It's kind of important, but not important yet. So once again, we're going to push another array by using the slice function. And now our the value of I is not 0. Instead, it's 2. So we're starting at 2. So 0, 1, 2, which is perfect. We're going to start cutting at C, and we're going to end at 2 plus 2, which would be 4. So we're going to start at 2, and we're going to end at 4. So we would say 0, 1, 2, 3. And since we already talked about how this slice function doesn't stop on the number we declare it to, it stops the number before, it would stop cutting technically at 3, which would leave us with another array that looks something like this, which is again perfect. So now once we push this new value to an array, we would then have this here. It will look something like this, which is literally absolutely what we wanted to do, because we want to have a two-dimensional array, which is what this is. So this basically works. But let's look at something up here that if we don't check, we wouldn't pass this challenge. It's this condition right here. We're going to continue running this for loop as long as the value of I is less than or equal to the length of our array. So even though we've already completed this challenge basically with this one right here, this would not be the end. This for loop would still have a thought that it needs to continue running, and the only way we can get it to run is by somehow using an extra check here, because right now this is going to continue running, because right now I is equal to 2, and technically 2 is less than or equal to 4, which is the length of that array. So it's going to continue running until I is less than or equal to 4. But now that we've continued the second run and I has increased yet again, we increased it by 2, now I is going to be equal to 4. So once this for loop runs, it'll say, hey, is 4 less than or equal to 4? Well, it's equal to it, so let's go ahead and run this for loop one last time. But it's going to hit this if statement, which I added for this reason in particular. It's going to say, is I, or 4, greater than or equal to the length of our array, which is 4? And it is. So we're not going to go ahead and push any other things because there's nothing else to push. Instead, we're just going to return the array and be completed. But now what would happen if we remove this if statement, this condition right here? Well, the for loop would have ran that last time, and it would have pushed one more array. Yeah, I know there's nothing else for it to push, so you're wondering what will it push exactly. Well, it would have just pushed an empty array. So instead of it being this completed here, it would have been something like this. It would have sent us this, and we would have failed the challenge because it's not how the array should look. So we have to make sure that we add this condition right here just to make sure that we're not going to add that empty array on just because the for loop wants to continue to run. So as long as we have that though, it should be fine. I'm going to remove that so we don't fail the challenge. And if I were to go ahead and run that, we won. We won. Okay, my head's not really in this today, guys. I just wanted to upload because I feel like it's a really tricky challenge and I thought that you guys would like a solution fast. But yeah, this is the solution that I got. I'm sure there's other ways to get a solution, and maybe they're not as tricky and complex as mine is, because I know that, this might not make any sense. But yeah, if it doesn't make sense or anything that I did here seems a little bit, complicated, just leave a comment. I'll definitely respond with why I did it and why it's important to do it, or what was the reasoning behind it, because I know that this is a little bit complicated. But other than that, hopefully you guys find this somewhat helpful. I know this is kind of a long video, but this was a complex challenge. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you have any comments, put them below, and go ahead and subscribe if this helped and didn't confuse you too much. Thanks.